All right, welcome to day 2 of our NBA project. By now, our intro questions should be filled out. So if they are not, you need to make sure that you go back to day 1 and make sure that you read through all of those instructions because so far we should have 2 tabs completely done and then a third tab should be partially done. And I'm going to go over which ones those are. So our intro questions should all be filled out. Our player overview tab should also all be filled out. Because we are all doing the same players, mine is not filled out or completed, but that's because I didn't want to give away answers or just have people pause the video and copy mine. And so by now all of these, so this whole column should be filled out in yellow, as well as our frequency table. And so our frequency table, remember, is telling us how many games our players that we chose, how many games they had between that many points, assists, and rebounds. So this is saying that Giannis had 17 games where he scored more than 21 points. And so that's what this is. So that's all done, or it should be. Then our project questions, the ones that are highlighted, should also be filled out completely by now. If they are not, make sure that you go back and you fill those out. And so now with day 2, we're going to start on our scatter plots. And so I'm grading you on your scatter plot, which means that your scatter plot needs to look like mine. Your scatter plot needs to have titles, it needs to have your players, it needs to have the key, the trend lines, all of the things that I have. So you need to make sure that you actually watch through this video and that you are actually putting all of the requirements into your scatter plot. So let's get started. You'll notice that I already copy and pasted all of your points, assists, and rebounds for each of your players, and I labeled it for you. If you want to change it to just their name and not player 1 or player 2 or player 3, you're more than welcome to do that as well. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the empty box right below the word games, and we are going to highlight over, and we're going to highlight all 3 players for all of their games 1 through 20, including the box above it. So that includes their names as well. Then you are going to go to Insert, Chart, and a chart should pop up. Now, sometimes it adds in this blue line here, and this blue line is representing our games. We don't want it to represent our games. What we are wanting is just the 3 players on there. So we only want LeBron, Giannis, and James Harden. We are not wanting games. So if this happens to you, you're going to go and click on where it says under Setup. It has series, and these are what they thought our players were. So the graph was trying to guess what we were trying to put in it. And so where it says games, we're going to click on those dots, and we're just going to hit remove. And then that gets us just our 3 players. So now we need to switch our graph because this is actually not the graph that we want. We are going to switch it. So you're going to click on chart type, and you are going to scroll down until you see scatter. And I want the one that looks like polka dots. So the first one. And now it looks like a bunch of random dots. It looks like a hot mess. I'm fully aware. However, the reason we want dots is because a line is continuous. So that means that whatever game they played, if you make it a line graph, it however you did in that game also determines how you do in the next game. But we know that that's not true. You're playing different teams. You could have been injured. You could have sat out. And so however LeBron did one game does not affect how he plays the next game. And so we want a scatter plot. So now that we have our scatter plot, we're going to go click on Customize. And when we click on Customize, we're going to click on Chart and Axis Titles. And when we do that, it has chart title, and then it put a title here because it assumed that it knew what we were talking about. It doesn't. So we are going to get rid of that title, and we are going to write points per game. And so now you'll see it automatically edits it to be on the graph. And now we're going to click on chart title, and the drop down will lead you here. And we're going to click on horizontal axis title. It doesn't have one yet, but what we want to do is add a title, and so we're going to write games. So at the bottom, this is telling us it started at 0 games, and then it goes all the way over. So this is over time, it's telling us how many games that they played. And then our vertical axis, so we're going to click on that again and go to vertical, and we're going to say points scored. And so that is now our vertical. So this is telling us that these numbers represent how many points were scored. So once we have that, we are going to then go down here and click on series. And we're going to scroll down until we see the word trend line, and we're going to just check that box. So what that does is it puts these lines that match our players' colors, and it puts it through the most points that it can. And what that's doing is showing us over time how they did. So you'll see the red player, which is Giannis, he actually was scoring more points at the beginning of the season than he was towards the end. That does not mean that like this game up here means he didn't score a lot of points. He did. He scored over 40 points. It's saying the average. So on average, it takes all of these points and it's showing us the average over time. And so that way we can see that his is actually decreasing over time. Then when we look at the yellow, you can see James Harden actually is increasing over time, as well as LeBron. So now that we have that graph, we're going to click out of it, and we are going to drag that graph over to that sign that I put in red that says place graph here. So we're going to just shrink that down and place our graph here. Now that's only one of our graphs. We have to do that for all of them. So we are now going to go and highlight underneath the word games and highlight everything in purple. We are going to click on Insert, Chart, and we're going to do the same thing. The only thing that changes is our titles. So again, we don't want this blue line in there. So we are going to click on the word games and we're going to hit remove. And then we need to switch it to a scatter plot. So we go to the chart type and you're going to scroll all the way down to scatter. And now let's do our axis titles. So we're going to click on customize, chart and axis titles. Our title, our chart title, we are going to say, these are our assists per game. And then click on chart title and we're going to go to horizontal. This is going to remain games. Click on it again and we're going to do vertical. And this is our assists per game. And then we have one more step. So we're going to go to series and we're going to click on trend lines. So again, you can kind of see those trend lines for each player and you can determine and see a visual of how they did over time. So then we're going to exit out of that and we're going to click on our graph. We're going to shrink it down a little bit and we are going to move that over below our other graph. All right, and now the last one. So we are going to highlight all of those numbers and everything in orange, insert, chart. Remember, we want to get rid of games. Now we are going to click on chart type. We want scatter plot again. Customize, titles. I always go back to my chart title. So this is rebounds per game. Now we're going to click on that and we're going to go horizontal was games. And vertical, we have number of rebounds. And then we have one final step, which is just to add those trend lines. Remember, we hit series, we scrolled down, and we hit trend line. So then now you can kind of see how each player did overall. So it looks like Giannis is pretty consistent with his rebounds, while James Harden was doing better at the beginning of the season. All right, so now we're going to shrink that down. And we're going to move that underneath. And so now we have 3 pictures to help us actually prove and show other people why we chose the player that we chose. So it just gives us a visual to help back us our decision up. All right, your turn.